Let's talk about the probabilities that a temporal cultural community will spawn. Let's say everything is fine and a lot of people want to migrate. How many can actually move per state? This also shows that non-subsistence jobs are worth more in terms of, so if you get a juicy mass migration, make sure. Hello fellow data friends. We will look at the migration after the changes of 1.6 today. We'll start with internal migration and do mass migration afterwards, because a lot from the mass migration system reuses stuff from the internal migration system. To get migration of a certain culture in a certain state, that state needs a corresponding culture community. You get a culture community for each culture already present in a state, but how do you get new ones? Each month, the game checks for each combination of state and culture within a market if a temporal culture community will spawn. A culture community will never spawn if a state is isolated from the market, has devastation above 50 or turmoil above 60. A temporal cultural community will stay for 3 weeks. If you have not gotten any immigration of that culture by then, the culture community will despawn. Let's talk about the probabilities that a temporal cultural community will spawn. There's a base chance of 0.1%. If your state is coastal, plus 0.1%. If the state has a port, plus 0.1%. If the state has a river, plus 0.1%. If the state has more than 20 unused arable land, plus 0.1%. If the state has a trade center, then plus 0.1%. If the greener grass campaign is active, plus 0.5%. And if the state is under colonization, plus 0.5%. So if you tick all the boxes here, you get 1.6% chance for each culture in your market that a cultural community will spawn in a state. There are some positive multipliers. The capital gets a 1.1 multiplier. Any primary cultures get a 2.5 multiplier, although you will need this probably only in colonies. If the state has good soils or a natural or special harbor, like New York Harbor, then you get a 1.2 multiplier. While these are helpful, there are not so many states that fulfill these special conditions. So for the sake of the argument, let's say you tick all the boxes in London for a non-primary culture, which is the capital and has the London Docklands. Then the chance for spawning a cultural community is 1.45% for each culture in your market. And we ignore negative modifiers for now. If you have many cultures in your market, this gives you a good chance that a random cultural community will spawn in that state. And each state in the country can roll on the spawn chance. So for bigger countries, this will work fine, because one state will always be lucky and spawn the right cultural community. But let's say you play a minor nation with only one state, and you want one very specific cultural community, like the Han Chinese. Then you roll only once a month on a 1.45% chance. This means that after 4 years, you have a chance of 50% that this cultural community spawned. And this is under perfect condition for non-primary cultures in an incorporated state. So for minor nations, just try to be lucky. And there is a huge list of negative modifiers, but I want to highlight some. If a culture does not share a heritage trait with any primary culture, and the state is a slave trade, then you get a massive penalty. So it's a hidden debuff to slavery. If you already have a lot of cultural communities in a state, then you get some more massive penalties. And these are stacking. So you have 15 cultural communities, you get all 3 debuffs. This makes it super unlikely to spawn temporal cultural communities once you already have several. And you can't have a higher spawn chance than 4% on each roll in general. So in conclusion, if you are a big country with a big market, you will be fine. Cultural communities will spawn and generate your internal migration. But if you are a small country in a small market, then you need luck or a lot of patience. And please subscribe if you like my videos, that would help a lot. Okay, assuming you have the right cultural communities, how do you actually get migration? At first, the culture in question needs to be allowed to leave the country of origin and enter your country. This depends on discrimination and migration laws of both countries. But on top of that, people need the desire to migrate. This is calculated by job satisfaction. Let's look at a random Hungarian peasant pop. These guys are not happy, though they are looking for a new job and might also consider migrating. These aristocrats, on the other hand, are happy where they are. They will not migrate. So even if you have the best migration attraction of all time, if everybody's happy at home, nobody will migrate. Let's say everything is fine and a lot of people want to migrate. How many can actually move per state? If a state has less than 20,000 population, there will be no immigration. If a state has less than 100,000 people, there will be reduced immigration. Okay, let's say we have enough population. Then the base value is 500 people per week in a single state. For each point of infrastructure in a state, add 5. Not more than 0.5% of all people in a state are allowed to move. But afterwards, add more people depending on how many are unemployed. So higher unemployment and higher infrastructure means more immigration. But there are similar limits for immigration. A state can only receive so many immigrants per week. Base value is 500, add 5 for each point of infrastructure, and lower the amount if there's a lot of unemployment in the target state. In the game files is also a line that says states need at least 75% of the most attractive states' migration attraction to receive migration. It's not perfectly clear to me, so let's run an experiment. Let's take a look at Austria's internal migration. As you can see, there's some internal migration going on. The average migration attraction in Austria is about 21. We are Argentina and we put down some greener grass edicts. So now our average migration attraction is above 70. So Austria's states should have less than 75% of the most attractive states. We get some interests in Austria and I will use the console to speed stuff up. The yes-man command makes the AI accept any player offer. And then we raise relations with Austria. So once our interests are in place, we can join the customs union. The internal migration does not change. Fast forward. Now there are no more green migration states, so people only leave Austria because some cultural communities spawned in our states. Here we have a South German culture community, so it's possible for Austrian South German pops to move to Argentina, and no Austrian state has at least 75% of the best possible target, so they only move to Argentina now. Okay, but how many people actually want to move each week? For each point difference in migration attraction, 5 people want to move per week. We can actually verify this in game. If I remove the greener grass edict, we see that there are still about 500 immigrants, but they come from more states because one single state provides less immigrants. Also, for every 100,000 people in a state, 1 point difference in migration attraction pulls 1 additional person. But the game files are unclear about which population, like the whole population of the South state, or only the population that is willing to move. Or maybe the population of the target state? My guess would be on the population of willing migrants, but it's just a guess. Also, migration is increased by 50% if people can move away from discrimination, and it's increased by another 20% if they move to their cultural homelands. There's also a line to minimize pop fragmentation, but I can only guess the meaning. If the moving people are less than 5% of any existing pop in the target state, then people won't move. If you have any other guess, please leave a comment. At first, if a state has no pops at all, it gets plus 100 migration attraction. But this is not helpful, is it? Then, for each point of average standard of living in a state, the state gets plus 2 migration attraction. Then, per 10,000 open non-subsistence jobs, the state gets plus 1.5 migration attraction, up to a maximum of 30 points. So if you massively build new jobs in a state, people will come. Then, a state gets plus 0.5 migration attraction per 10,000 open subsistence jobs up to a maximum of 30 points. But there's a catch in the calculation. The first 25% of all possible subsistence jobs don't count. The Argentine Confederation gets 60.3 migration attraction from unused arable land. This should mean that there are 326,000 open subsistence jobs, right? But there's more. So 25% of 455,000 are about 113,000. Only open subsistence jobs above these 113,000 count. So in this case, only 341,000 jobs account for migration attraction and 15,000 people are already working there. So only 326,000 jobs count towards migration attraction. According to the game files, this is done so that China does not get a lot of migration attraction due to big rice farms. This also shows that non-subsistence jobs are worth more in terms of migration attraction. If you build up an agrarian industry in a state, which usually needs less construction points, you can transform low migration attraction jobs into higher attraction jobs. This boosts migration attraction in the short term, but you also sacrifice the bonuses from the subsistence jobs in the long run. Then, migration attraction is lowered by -1 per each 10,000 unemployed pops up to a maximum of 50 points. So if you cannot keep up with immigration, the migration attraction will be reduced accordingly. These are the base values without any modifiers or events. What else influences migration attraction? Well, the rank of your country does. Great and major powers get a bonus to migration attraction. Low country ranks get a strong decrease in migration attraction. Also, prosperous oil companies give a 10% bonus. And obviously, there is the greener grass edict, which gives 20 migration attraction as absolute bonus, and plus 25% as percentage bonus, which is huge. If you keep the normal intelligentsia happy, you get another 25% bonus. There are also two special interest groups. The landowners of Brazil has plus 20% migration attraction, and the rural folk of Brazil give another 15% of migration attraction. But Brazil's intelligentsia does not give a migration bonus. Frontier colonization and resettlement give plus 50% migration attraction for unincorporated states, although these can't be targets of mass migrations. Of course, there are also negative modifiers like devastation, pollution, and several stages of turmoil. Obviously, you want to avoid those. There are many events which can influence migration attraction positively and negatively, but the last modifier I want to mention is plus 25% for a trade center. Is there any other topic which interests you and needs a deep dive into the game files? Tell me in a comment. To get mass migrations, you need at least one state that is able to get some. The requirements are written down in the mass migration nested tooltip here. A state needs to be incorporated, it must have at least 20 arable land and 70% market access. So Togo here cannot get a mass migration because there's not enough arable land. And each state can only have one mass migration at a time. Of course, your laws need to allow migration to happen. There are separate map modes to see which states can get a mass migration and how high mass migration attraction is. First, let me remove all greener grass edicts. The mass migration attraction of Argentina is about 33 and is calculated as average migration attraction of all states that are possible mass migration targets. The US has a mass migration attraction of almost 50 because many states have a lot of arable land and the US is a great power. But the US has also a lot of possible mass migration targets. Let's place some edicts in Argentina. Now our mass migration attraction has skyrocketed to almost 70 because we placed an edict in every incorporated state. But if a country has less than 4 states, it gets a debuff for mass migration attraction. Let's look at Chile. It has only 2 possible states with about 27 migration attraction each, but the mass migration attraction is only 16. For each state less than 4, the mass migration attraction gets a minus 20% multiplier. Interestingly, a state counts as not possible for mass migration when it has an ongoing mass migration. That means if you have only 4 possible states and one gets mass migration, then you also get the migration debuff of not having enough states. This is from another save, where some mass migrations are going on. As you can see, the mass migration attraction is way below the migration attraction of the last states. While I think that mass migrations would typically target the countries with the highest migration, Paradox still added some randomness. But I don't know if 0.5 is a lot or not. A mass migration can spawn if a culture has at least 15% turmoil in its cultural homelands and if the country has at least 100,000 possible migrants. This implies that, for example, North Germans in the US will never start a mass migration to leave the US. Also, a mass migration of a certain culture will only target a country if that culture has less than 30% turmoil in that country. So even if your states are possible targets, such a culture will never choose your country. Turmoil is also important for actually spawning a mass migration, although I am not sure about the exact effect. The game files say mass migration spawn chance equals 2 and it's scaling with turmoil. I read this as a 2% chance of spawning a mass migration per week for 100% turmoil. Scale accordingly. I might be wrong though. Since 15% turmoil is needed anyway, this means a 0.3% weekly spawn chance at minimum. Also, if the standard of living is below 10, then the chance increases by 0.2% for each point below 10. If the standard of living is below 5, then the chance increases by another 1% for each point below 5. These are stacking. Also, A mass migration is active for 12 months and there's a 4-year cooldown per culture and country. Similar to the normal migration, there are limits in calculations how many people can and will actually move during a mass migration. The numbers are different, but mass migration are basically just supersized migrations. Each point of difference in migration attraction between source and target will pull 10 people instead of 5. And the difference in migration attraction needs to be bigger than 10, otherwise there will be no migration at all. The immigration limit is 3 times the normal immigration limit, as explained in the previous chapter. The immigration limit is 5 times the normal immigration limit. We can also see this in-game. This is another save, and there's a South German mass migration going on, with about 11,000 weekly migration. Let's remove the greener grass edict and wait 2 weeks. Suddenly, our migration dropped to 4,000, and 2,000 are even leaving. Let's add the greener grass edict again, and again 11,000. Same is for infrastructure. The state has 278 infrastructure and almost 60 from road maintenance. Let's remove the edict and wait. It dropped by about 600 people per week. Add the edict again, and the 600 people are back. So if you get a juicy mass migration, make sure to add both edicts to maximize the mass migration effect. Mass migrations are a bit special in the sense that they also affect neighboring states of the actual target. One neighboring state can only get up to 50% of the migration in total, and the distribution of migration attraction between the target and neighboring states influences which percentage of the mass migration each state gets, although the target state gets a higher multiplier. According to the game files, this only influences the share each states get, not the total migration. If you want to learn how AI countries decide if they back down in a deep replay, click on the top video. Thanks a lot for listening. Please consider liking and subscribing.